Welcome to Know Your Sheet. From tracking targets to budget battles, I've got a sheet for that. Let's get organized so you can know your sheet too. In this mini-series, we will work to know your budget sheet. This mini-series will walk you through setting up a spreadsheet to help you keep track of your income and expenses so you can start taking more control of where your money goes. This video will continue from where we left off last time, where we have all of our income, data from regular and irregular expenses, and totals and averages. So the first thing I'm going to do in this episode is actually go through and start formatting all of this data. I'm going to color code the data that we've already entered so far to make this easier to read and easier to see what's happening at a glance. I'm going to color our income green. Regular expenses can be this tannish beige color. Utilities can be blue. Irregular expenses, let's make those gray. And credit cards can be yellow. Also, to add a little more to these numbers, let's go ahead and add a supplemental income row. And let's also format the months so that the header stands out a bit. Okay, let's do some conditional formatting on the in and out difference. Let's start with if the in and out difference is less than 0, we'll highlight those cells red. And then we'll add another rule where if the amount is greater than 0, we'll highlight those green. Then we can see which months we're doing well on our bills and which we are not. Now let's do the same conditional formatting for the amount that we should be saving in our account in order to pay the irregular bills. So what we'll first need to do is actually create a row that will give us the difference. And then we can apply the conditional formatting to that row. Let's manually change a number here real quick, just to make sure that our conditional formatting is working. Okay, with that, now we are ready for visualizations. That means we're ready to make some charts. So let's go ahead and add a chart for our total savings. So let's make sure we have the labels for the month and the total in our savings each month. And we're starting off with line charts here, but I'll show you bar charts later. So now that we have a chart for our savings, which is our goal, our objective, the thing that we want to keep growing, let's do another chart where we take a look at the total bills we have each month, charted alongside the in and out difference every month, alongside how much we are supposed to be setting aside minimum every month. Granted, this may not be how you want to view your data, but I'm just giving you an example of how you can plot different things if you're trying to compare different numbers to see how it's impacting your budget. This is how you would go about doing it in Google Sheets. So this is how it looks as a line chart, but you can very easily go in to the chart editor and switch them to bar charts if you prefer to look at them that way. For myself, I like looking at the line charts. I like to look at the angle and trajectory and the pattern that you can see when it's a line chart, if it's trending up or down. Kind of like those stock market charts that you always see. It's just easier for me to digest the information as a line chart. But please choose however works best for you so that you can interpret the information the way you need to. Okay, now let's do another chart where we look at the in and out difference every month, adding to our savings every month. If you've watched my Excel episodes for Know Your Budget, you probably noticed that I'm a little faster in Excel than Google Sheets. The settings in Google Sheet are quite different, so it's a little slower for me to navigate to where the settings are, but how the spreadsheet works, how they behave, are very similar. All boils down to the same concepts. So definitely use whichever you're the most comfortable with. And of course, whatever is available to you. Okay, at this point, our bills really are not very realistic here. So I'm going to go ahead and add a groceries credit card. If you have to buy food for a family or even just for yourself, there's no way that in this economy that the bills are that low. So let's go ahead and add a groceries row here. And to make the numbers a little varying and realistic, we'll use random to generate some realistic looking data. Once I've generated the data, I will go ahead and copy the values in and pretend like those were the values to begin with. And let's make sure that the total credit card row is calculating correctly. If everything looks good, then let's create another chart where we pretend that the 2025 sheet is last year's budget and 2025 V2 is this year's budget. So let's do a chart where we compare the total bills from last year versus the total bills from this year. I hope you're as excited as I am about all the different ways you could possibly look at all this data that you now have. And we haven't even touched upon pivot tables or anything. Anyway, back to the budget sheet. Something a little extra I'm going to show you that is way overkill for this, but I'm going to show you anyway. Something I like to do is actually validate my data. So something as simple as, say, the irregular expenses, we've logged them on another sheet so that we can get into the nitty gritty of those expenses and keep our budget spreadsheet clean and simple. Well, one thing that I would normally do is that after putting out all this data on the expenses spreadsheet, I'm going to go ahead and validate that I actually used each of these. I referenced them in the budget spreadsheet. So what I'll do is I'll create an is used column and I'll write a formula to show if this was referenced in our budget sheet in column A, I want to be able to tell if I've actually referenced it or not. So if the expense is not referenced, it will show NA. So let's say oil change was typed instead of car maintenance at some point. So you'll see that the validation fails. Now, on the budget sheet, you can add validations to those cells to only allow selection of values based on a list that you can provide or reference elsewhere. So let's go ahead and do that. Now let's add validations to these cells where you can only list the expenses that were actually named on the irregular expenses list. And now those cells will validate whether or not you used allowed values or not. And that's just another little tidbit to help keep your data accurate. If you're referencing multiple sheets, if you have a lot of data that you are tracking separately and you want to simplify it in your budget sheet. Again, it's not really needed for a spreadsheet like this, but I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into how I manage my sheet and how it can go from a very simple income and expenses and totals spreadsheet into something much more complicated and much more elaborate. And with that, we now have a useful version of our budget spreadsheet. Check out the next video in this mini-series to see how we will expand and grow this spreadsheet so that we can kind of project and predict what our bills will look like in the upcoming month or with the next set of bills that need to be paid. This series has 4 episodes planned, but if you've got questions or requests, leave them in the comments. I'll dig through them all and create a part 5 based on what you want added to the budget sheet, because your sheet should work for you. Got a spreadsheet win or a formula fail? Drop it in the comments and share your sheet. Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep your cells clean and your formulas tight. And remember, don't just use your sheet, know your sheet.